She thought the worst part of Christmas Eve would be sitting alone at a restaurant, rejected by a man who took one look and walked away. She was wrong. The worst part came later, when she realized she'd been falling in love with a widower and his daughter, only to hear him say he couldn't replace his late wife's memory with her. But before you hear how it all fell apart, stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The snow had started falling at 4:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before Nora Hale was supposed to meet her blind date at the Green Lantern Bistro. She remembered the time because she'd checked her phone obsessively while standing outside her apartment building, watching the flakes drift past the streetlights like tiny crystalline promises. Each one seemed to whisper that tonight would be different. Tonight would be the night her luck finally changed. She should have known better. Nora pulled her navy wool coat tighter around her shoulders as she walked down Boylston Street, her boots leaving temporary impressions in the fresh powder. Downtown Boston had transformed into something from a storybook, the kind of scene that made lonely people feel even lonelier. Couples walked hand in hand past shop windows strung with lights. Families laughed their way into restaurants. Somewhere in the distance, carolers were butchering Silent Night with more enthusiasm than talent. And here she was, 32 years old, walking to meet a man whose face she'd only seen in two carefully curated photos on a dating app. "You're being brave," her best friend Jenna had said that morning over coffee. "Most people spend Christmas Eve with family. You're putting yourself out there." Brave. The word had felt like armor then. Now, 6 hours later, it felt like a lie she'd told herself to justify the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The Green Lantern Bistro sat on a corner, its windows fogged with warmth and conversation. Through the glass, Nora could see the glow of candles on white tablecloths, the shimmer of champagne glasses, the easy intimacy of people who belonged to someone. She paused at the door, her hand on the brass handle, and took a breath that tasted like snow and second chances. Please let this be different, she thought. Please let him be kind. The hostess, a young woman with perfect winged eyeliner and a smile that suggested she'd never been stood up in her life, greeted Nora with practiced warmth. "Good evening! Welcome to the Green Lantern. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes. Under Thompson? James Thompson?" Nora's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. The hostess scanned her list. "Ah, yes. Party of 2, 7 o'clock. He hasn't arrived yet, but I can show you to your table." Of course he hasn't arrived yet. Nora followed the hostess through the maze of tables, acutely aware of the couples on either side of her, the way they leaned into each other like plants growing toward the same source of light. The hostess stopped at a small table near the window. Prime real estate, really, with a view of the snow-dusted street and the decorated tree in the square across the way. "Can I start you with something to drink while you wait?" the hostess asked. "Water is fine. Thank you." Alone at the table, Nora arranged herself carefully. Coat on the back of the chair, purse at her feet. Phone face down on the table because checking it constantly made her look desperate, even if desperate was exactly what she felt. She smoothed her dress, a deep green velvet number she'd bought specifically for tonight, one that made her feel elegant instead of just ordinary, and tried to remember the breathing exercises her therapist had taught her. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. 7 o'clock came and went. Nora ordered a glass of Chardonnay she didn't really want. The waiter, an older man with kind eyes that reminded her of her father, brought it with a sympathetic smile that made her wonder if he could smell the desperation on her after all. 7:15. 7:23. 7:37. Other diners began to glance her way. She felt their pity like a physical weight. The woman at the next table leaned over to her husband, whispering something that made him look at Nora with an expression that said, "There but for the grace of God." A waitress clearing dishes nearby gave her an encouraging nod, the universal sign of "hang in there, sister." At 7:41, her phone buzzed. James Thompson. "Running late. Traffic is awful. Be there in 5 minutes." She could survive 5 more minutes. Nora took a long sip of wine and watched the snow accumulate on the windowsill. Somewhere inside her chest, hope flickered like a candle in a draft, weakening but not yet extinguished. 7:46, 7:52, 8:03. When James Thompson finally walked through the door at 8:07 p.m., 1 hour and 7 minutes late. Nora recognized him immediately from his profile pictures. Tall, probably 6'1" or 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of jaw that suggested he'd been popular in high school and never quite got over it. He wore an expensive-looking charcoal suit and the casual confidence of a man who'd never doubted his own appeal. He spotted her table, walked over, and then, God, she'd replay this moment in her mind for weeks. He stopped 3 feet away and just looked at her. Really looked. His eyes traveled from her face down to her shoulders, to her dress, to the wine glass in her hand, and back up again. It was an assessment, clinical and cold, the way you might evaluate a used car you'd been misled about online. Nora felt something in her chest crack. "Nora?" he said, as if confirming what he already regretted. "Hi." "Yes." "James?" She stood, extending her hand, trying to salvage whatever this was becoming. He didn't take it. Instead, he sighed, actually sighed, and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I'm sorry. I should have... The photos on your profile were different." The words hit her like ice water. "Different how?" "I don't know. The angle, maybe, or the lighting?" He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop talking. "It's just, I have a type, you know? And I like softer women. Curvier? More..." He gestured vaguely at her body, at her dress, at everything she'd spent 2 hours getting ready. "This isn't really what I was expecting." The restaurant noise seemed to recede. Nora heard her own heartbeat, loud and arrhythmic. Somewhere to her left, a woman laughed at something her partner said. The sound felt obscene. "So you're... what? Leaving?" Nora heard her own voice as if from a great distance. "Yeah, I mean, no point wasting both our evenings, right?" James glanced at his watch, an actual Rolex, because of course it was. "You seem nice, though. I'm sure you'll find someone who's into your... look." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and placed it on the table next to her wine glass. "Merry Christmas," he said. And then James Thompson walked out of the Green Lantern Bistro, leaving Nora standing alone beside a table set for 2, holding a handshake that no one had accepted. For a long moment, she didn't move. Couldn't move. The other diners had definitely noticed now. She felt their eyes like hot coals against her skin. The waiter who'd brought her wine earlier approached cautiously, the way you might approach a wounded animal. "Miss, are you... would you like me to box up anything, or..." No, thank you." Her voice sounded remarkably steady. "I'm just going to... I'll just go." Her hands shook as she reached for her coat. The fabric felt impossibly heavy as she pulled it on. Her purse strap tangled on the chair. She fumbled with it, her vision blurring, and that's when she realized she was crying. Not sobbing, nothing that dramatic. Just tears, silent and hot, sliding down her cheeks and dripping onto the green velvet dress she'd been so proud of 2 hours ago. "Don't break down here. Not here, just get outside." She turned toward the exit, head down, when a voice, small and clear as a bell, stopped her in her tracks. "Why are you sad?" Nora looked down. A little girl stood at her knee, no more than 3 years old, wearing a red velvet dress that matched the Christmas decorations scattered throughout the restaurant. She had wild dark curls pulled into 2 uneven pigtails, and eyes the color of hot chocolate. In her arms, she clutched a hand-knitted teddy bear that had seen better days, one ear partially detached and hanging by a thread. The child stared up at Nora with the kind of unfiltered concern that only small children possess, completely sincere, utterly fearless. Nora wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "I'm okay, sweetie. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're crying." The girl said this matter-of-factly, as if pointing out that the sky was blue or snow was cold. She shifted the bear to one arm and reached up with her free hand, her tiny fingers stretching toward Nora's. "Crying means sad. Are you sad?" "Daisy! Oh my God, Daisy, I'm so sorry!" A man appeared behind the child, moving with the controlled panic of a parent whose kid has just latched onto a stranger. He was younger than Nora expected, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of exhausted handsomeness that came from too many sleepless nights. Dark hair that needed a cut, gray eyes that looked permanently worried, flower on his sleeve. He placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Daisy, honey, you can't just walk up to people and... His eyes landed on Nora's face, taking in the tears, the trembling hands, the obvious distress. His expression shifted immediately from embarrassment to concern. Oh, miss, I'm really sorry if she bothered you. She has a habit of trying to fix things. I'm not bothering, Daisy said indignantly. I'm helping. She's sad, Daddy. I can see that, baby, but sometimes grown-ups need space when they're... No, Nora said suddenly, surprising herself. She knelt down until she was eye level with Daisy, not caring that her knees pressed into the restaurant's hardwood floor or that more people were definitely staring now. No, she's not bothering me at all. Up close, the little girl smelled like maple syrup and baby shampoo. Her pigtails were definitely uneven, one significantly higher than the other, and there was what looked like crayon on her collar. She studied Nora's face with the intensity of a tiny scientist. Did someone make you sad? Daisy asked. The question was so direct, so innocent, that Nora felt something loosen in her chest. Yes, she admitted. Someone made me sad. Daisy nodded gravely, as if this confirmed her suspicions. Then, without warning, she launched herself forward and wrapped her small arms around Nora's neck. The hug was sticky and tight and smelled like children and Christmas dinner. Nora's breath caught. When was the last time someone had hugged her like this? Like she was precious. Like she mattered. She couldn't remember. Hugs fix droopy faces, Daisy whispered against her shoulder, a pronouncement that sounded like a direct quote from some parenting book. That's what my daddy says. Over the child's curls, Nora met the father's eyes. He looked mortified. I am so sorry, he said again. Daisy, we need to let the nice lady... It's okay, Nora said softly. She gently extracted herself from the hug and smiled at Daisy, the first genuine smile she'd managed all evening. Thank you. That was exactly what I needed. Daisy beamed, showing a gap where a tooth should have been. See, Daddy? I fixed her droopy face. The man ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look suddenly, vulnerably human. We're working on boundaries. The concept of personal space. It's a process. It's a good quality, Nora said, standing up. Her knees protested slightly. Being kind, wanting to help. Most people find it alarming when a 3-year-old launches herself at them in restaurants. I'm not most people. The words hung in the air between them for a moment. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or curiosity? He extended his hand, the gesture formal, but his smile warm. Mason Carter, he said. And you've met Daisy, who apparently moonlights as an emotional support child. Nora Hale. His hand was warm, calloused, real. She held it perhaps a beat too long before letting go. And I think emotional support child might be the best job description I've ever heard. I'm not a child. I'm 3 3/4, Daisy interjected with immense dignity. Then she grabbed Nora's hand with surprising strength. Are you eating dinner? We're eating dinner. You can eat with us. Daisy, Mason said gently, Miss Nora probably has plans. I don't, Nora blurted out before she could stop herself. The truth landed between them, raw and slightly pathetic. I mean, I did, but... She gestured vaguely at the empty table behind her, the wine glass, the $20 bill that James had left like payment for services not rendered. They fell through. Understanding dawned in Mason's eyes. Not pity, thank God, not pity, but something softer. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who understood what it meant to sit alone at a table set for 2. Then, please, he said quietly, join us. I promise Daisy's table manners are better than her boundary recognition, marginally. They're very good, Daisy insisted. I use a fork and a spoon. Nora looked at them, this tired father and his wild-haired daughter, and felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't hope, exactly. Hope had been shattered about 15 minutes ago when James Thompson had looked her over like damaged goods. This was something smaller, more fragile, maybe just the absence of loneliness, even if only for an hour. Okay, she said. Yes, thank you. Daisy's squeal of delight turned several heads. She kept hold of Nora's hand and began tugging her toward a table on the other side of the restaurant, chattering the entire way about her teddy bear. His name is Mr. Buttons, but one of his buttons fell off, so really, he should be Mr. No Buttons. But that's sad. And what she'd ordered for dinner. Chicken fingers because I'm fancy tonight, Daddy said. Mason followed behind them, carrying what looked like a high chair that Daisy clearly didn't need anymore, but apparently refused to give up. He caught Nora's eye over his daughter's head and mouthed, "Sorry," again, but he was smiling now, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Their table was next to a window, similar to the one Nora had just abandoned. Mason had already ordered 2 plates of pasta, a side of chicken fingers, and what looked like enough bread to feed a small army. "We over-ordered," Mason explained as he helped Daisy climb into her chair. "We always over-order. Daisy's convinced we're going to run out of food mid-meal, like we're trapped in a snowstorm instead of just in downtown Boston." "One time we ran out of French fries," Daisy said solemnly. "It was very terrible." "It was a minor fry shortage at best," Mason corrected, but he was smiling. He pulled out a chair for Nora, another old-fashioned gesture that felt like something from a different era. "Please, sit. And if you're vegetarian or have allergies or anything, we can order you something else." "I'm not," Nora said, sitting down slowly, still slightly dazed by the turn her evening had taken. "And pasta sounds perfect, actually." The waiter appeared, a different one from before, mercifully, someone who didn't know she'd just been publicly rejected. Mason ordered another plate of pasta and a glass of wine for Nora, checking with her first about what kind she preferred. His attention to these small details felt almost foreign after months of bad first dates and worse second dates. When the waiter left, Daisy immediately launched into a detailed explanation of Mr. Button's entire backstory, which apparently involved a dramatic rescue from a thrift store and a complicated surgery to reattach his arm. Mason listened with the patient attention of someone who'd heard this story 800 times, but still found it charming. Nora found herself relaxing, the tension in her shoulders slowly unwinding. "So," Mason said when Daisy paused to take a breath, "I have to ask, and please feel free to tell me it's none of my business, but what kind of person stands up someone on Christmas Eve?" The question was gentle, no judgment in it, but Nora still flinched. "He didn't stand me up, technically. He showed up. And then? And then he took one look at me and decided I wasn't what he was looking for." She tried to keep her voice light, casual, like it hadn't carved something out of her chest. "Apparently I'm not soft enough. His words." Mason's expression darkened. "Jesus." "Jesus is a bad word," Daisy piped up helpfully. "Unless you're praying." "You're right, baby. Sorry." Mason looked at Nora, and there was something fierce in his eyes now. "That guy is an idiot. You don't know that. You don't know me. I know that anyone who would judge someone based on," he gestured at her, struggling for words, "based on whether they fit some predetermined checklist, that person is missing the whole point." "The point of what?" "Of everything." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "Of dating, of meeting someone. You're supposed to be surprised by who you connect with. That's the whole—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Sorry. I'm overstepping. We just met. I have no right to be—" "No, it's—" Nora found herself smiling despite everything. "It's nice. Thank you." Their food arrived, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence. Well, mostly silence. Daisy provided a running commentary on her chicken fingers, ranking them by size and giving each one a name before eating it. Mason apologized approximately every 30 seconds for something: his daughter's volume, the fact that she'd started arranging her peas into a smiley face, her insistence on sharing her chicken finger named Barbara with Nora. "Stop apologizing," Nora finally said, accepting Barbara the chicken finger with appropriate solemnity. This is the best part of my day. Honestly." Mason studied her face for a moment, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. "Mine too," he said quietly. "You'd be surprised how many Christmas Eves I've spent eating dinner with just Daisy, wishing we had someone else at the table." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. "Where's—" Nora started, then stopped. "Sorry, that's too personal." "Her mom—" Mason said it matter-of-factly, but Nora heard the careful control in his voice. Gone. Since Daisy was one. And before you ask the next logical question, no, she's not coming back. Ever. I'm sorry. Don't be. Some people aren't built for... He glanced at Daisy, who was now using her remaining peas as ammunition to shoot at her water glass. For this, for commitment, for kids, for staying. Still, that must be hard. It is, sometimes. He cut a piece of pasta with more force than necessary. But we manage, don't we, Daisy? We manage very well, Daisy agreed, though she clearly had no idea what she was agreeing to. And now Nora can manage with us. Daisy, honey, Nora has her own life. But she's sad, and we're sad, and sad people should manage together. Nora felt her eyes burning again, but this time it wasn't from humiliation. You're sad? She asked Daisy gently. The little girl considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. Sometimes, on account of I don't have a mommy and all the other kids do, but I have Daddy and Mr. Buttons, so mostly I'm happy, like 70% happy. 70% is pretty good, Nora said around the lump in her throat. What percent happy are you? Daisy asked. It was such an absurd question, so childishly direct, that Nora almost laughed. Right now, in this moment? She looked around the table, at the pasta they were sharing, at Daisy's gap-toothed smile, at Mason's worried eyes. Maybe 60%. But climbing. See? Daisy said to her father triumphantly. I'm helping. They stayed at the restaurant for 2 more hours. The pasta turned into dessert, chocolate cake that Daisy insisted on helping Nora eat, which meant Daisy ate most of it while Nora gamely nibbled at the edges. Mason told stories about his work as a bakery owner, about inheriting his grandmother's recipes and his battle with a temperamental industrial oven named Bertha. Nora found herself talking about her job as a children's book illustrator, about the way she'd always felt more comfortable drawing emotions than expressing them. That's why your hands have paint on them, Daisy observed, grabbing Nora's hand to examine it closely. There was, indeed, a smudge of cerulean blue on her thumb that she'd missed earlier. You're an artist. Something like that. Can you draw Mr. Buttons? Daisy, Mason warned. Let Nora finish her cake. No, it's okay. Nora pulled a napkin toward her and borrowed a pen from the waiter. In quick, confident strokes, she sketched Mr. Buttons, slightly more handsome than his real-life counterpart, with both ears intact and a heroic expression. She added a cape for good measure. Daisy's eyes went wide. He's beautiful. He's very dashing, Nora agreed, handing over the napkin. Mason leaned over to look, and his expression shifted into something Nora couldn't quite read. Wonder, maybe. Or recognition. You're really good, he said. It's just a doodle. No, it's... He pointed at the way she'd captured Mr. Button's personality in just a few lines. You made him look brave. How did you know he was brave? Daisy told me about the thrift store rescue. That's a brave bear. They smiled at each other over Daisy's head, and Nora felt that flutter again in her chest, the one she'd thought was permanently dead as of 2 hours ago. Eventually, the restaurant began to empty. The waiter brought the check, and Mason reached for it immediately, waving off Nora's protests. You got publicly humiliated in my restaurant, he said. The least I can do is buy you dinner. This isn't your restaurant. You know what I mean. He paid in cash, leaving a generous tip, and helped Daisy into her winter coat, a red puffer that made her look like a tiny marshmallow. Outside, the snow had intensified. Boylston Street looked like something from a movie set, the kind of Christmas scene that usually made Nora feel excluded from the magic. But standing there with Mason and Daisy, watching the snow fall through the streetlight, she felt something she hadn't expected. Belonging. Which way are you headed? Mason asked, zipping Daisy's coat up to her chin. Toward the Common. I'm on Beacon Hill. We're going that way too. Walk with us? They made their way through the snowy streets, Daisy between them, holding both their hands and swinging with each step. She chattered about everything and nothing, about how snowflakes were actually made of ice crystals shaped like stars, about how Santa was probably almost done with his deliveries, about how she'd asked for a new mommy for Christmas, but her daddy said, that's not how Santa works. Mason looked like he wanted the snow to swallow him whole. I told her Santa brings toys, not people, he explained quietly, while Daisy was distracted by a particularly impressive Christmas display. But she's convinced there's a loophole. Is there? Nora asked, surprising herself. A loophole? For someone who deserves a family? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Nora saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not pity, not even kindness, just possibility. Maybe, he said softly. They reached the edge of the common, where their paths would diverge. Daisy, exhausted from dinner and excitement, had gone quiet, leaning heavily against her father's leg. "This is us," Mason said, gesturing toward a side street. "We're just off Charles." "I'm up Beacon." Nora pointed in the opposite direction. They stood there in the snow, neither moving, and Nora felt the weight of the moment. This was where it would end, this strange, perfect bubble of an evening where she'd been rescued by a 3-year-old and her widowed father. Tomorrow she'd wake up and it would just be a story, a weird Christmas Eve tale to tell Jenna over coffee. Unless. "Could I?" Mason started, then stopped, started again. "Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked for your number? After you fed me and let your daughter emotionally support me through a crisis? Completely inappropriate," Nora said, but she was already pulling out her phone. They exchanged numbers under the streetlight, their fingers fumbling with cold and something else. When Mason's phone buzzed with her text, she'd sent a simple "Hi, it's the woman with the droopy face." He smiled. "I'm really glad Daisy accosted you tonight," he said. "I'm really glad she did too." Daisy, half asleep, mumbled something that sounded like "new mommy" and buried her face in Mason's coat. "Ignore her," Mason said quickly. "She's delirious." "Or honest," Nora suggested. They said goodnight, awkward, lingering, not wanting to end but not knowing how to continue. Finally, Mason scooped up Daisy and started walking backward, waving until they disappeared around the corner. Nora stood in the snow for a long moment after they'd gone, her phone warm in her pocket, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. The evening had started with rejection and humiliation. It should have broken her. But instead she felt hope. The fragile, dangerous kind. She turned toward home, and for the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about everything she lacked. She was thinking about a little girl who'd offered her a hug without hesitation, a man who'd looked at her like she was someone worth seeing, and a Christmas Eve that had somehow become magical despite its disastrous start. Her phone buzzed. Mason Carter. "Daisy wants me to tell you that you're invited to breakfast tomorrow. Actually, she demanded it. I'm just the messenger." Nora smiled at the screen, snowflakes catching in her hair. Nora Hale. "What time?" Mason Carter. "Is 9 too early? We're early risers, hazard of the bakery business." Nora Hale. 9 is perfect. Mason Carter. "Fair warning, Daisy makes pancakes with more enthusiasm than skill." Nora Hale. "Those are the best kind." She walked home through the snow, and the loneliness that had sat like a stone in her chest for months felt lighter somehow. Not gone, grief and rejection didn't disappear that easily, but manageable. Like maybe 70% happy wasn't such a bad place to start. When she reached her apartment, she turned to look back at the snowy street, at the lights of Boston spreading out below Beacon Hill like a constellation of second chances. And she thought, maybe James Thompson did me a favor. Because if he'd been kind, if he'd stayed, she never would have met a 3-year-old girl who fixed droopy faces with hugs, or her father who looked at her like she was someone worth knowing instead of someone worth dismissing. The universe, it seemed, had a strange sense of timing. Nora went inside, hung up her coat, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The green velvet dress was slightly wrinkled now, her makeup smudged from crying and laughing and everything in between. But she looked alive. Like someone who'd survived something and come out the other side with possibility in her pocket and a breakfast invitation on her phone. She texted Jenna, "You won't believe what happened." Then she changed into pajamas, made herself tea, and sat by her window watching the snow fall over Boston. And for the first time in a year, she let herself imagine something beyond survival. She let herself imagine family. Nora woke on Christmas morning to 17 texts from Jenna, each one more insistent than the last. demanding details about what could possibly have happened to transform her disaster date into something worth celebrating. She ignored them all, pulled on jeans and a cream-colored sweater, and spent 20 minutes trying to decide if wearing makeup to breakfast with a 3-year-old and her father counted as trying too hard. She wore it anyway. The address Mason had texted led her to a narrow brownstone tucked between a bookshop and a vintage clothing store on Charles Street. The front window displayed a hand-painted sign, Carter's Est 1952. Through the glass, she could see rows of pastries, crusty bread loaves, and a glass case full of cakes that looked like edible architecture. Before she could knock, the door flew open. "You came!" Daisy launched herself at Nora's knees with the force of a tiny cannonball. She wore pajamas covered in reindeer and mismatched socks, one red and one green. Her hair had been pulled into the same uneven pigtails as last night, suggesting Mason's hairstyling skills hadn't improved overnight. "Daddy said maybe you wouldn't come because grown-ups sometimes say yes, but mean maybe. But I knew you would come because you promised, and promises are forever." "Daisy, let her breathe," Mason called from somewhere inside. "She just got here." He appeared a moment later, wiping flour from his hands onto an apron that read, "I need you," in faded letters. He looked different in the morning light, younger somehow, despite the exhaustion still visible around his eyes. His hair stuck up in about 7 different directions, and there was what looked like pancake batter on his shoulder. "Hi," he said, and the simple word carried so much weight, nervousness, hope, the acknowledgement that last night had been real, and this morning was a test of whether it could become something more. "Hi," Nora echoed. "I brought—" She held up a bottle of maple syrup she'd grabbed from her apartment, then immediately felt stupid. "I don't know why I brought this. You probably have syrup. You own a bakery." "We have 17 types of syrup," Daisy announced proudly. "But yours is special because you brought it, so we're using it first." Mason smiled, and the warmth of it did something dangerous to Nora's equilibrium. "Come in, please, before my daughter drags you in physically." The bakery smelled like heaven, yeast and cinnamon and butter and possibility. The front room housed the shop itself, empty now because of the holiday, but Nora could imagine it full of morning customers clutching coffee and croissants. Mason led her through a doorway behind the counter and up a narrow staircase. "We live above the shop," he explained. "My grandmother started the business. My dad took it over, then me. It's kind of a family curse, or blessing, depending on the day." "Today it's a blessing," Daisy interjected, skipping up the stairs ahead of them, "because we have pancakes." The apartment above the bakery was small but warm, decorated in what Nora would call comfortable chaos. Daisy's toys occupied every horizontal surface. Books leaned in precarious towers. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, slightly crooked, decorated with an eclectic mix of ornaments that looked handmade. Nora spotted several that were clearly Daisy's work: construction paper snowflakes, popsicle stick reindeer, and what might have been an angel or possibly a very abstract chicken. "Sorry about the mess," Mason said, moving a stack of picture books off the couch. "We had big plans to clean before you came, but then Daisy insisted on making you a welcome card, which somehow involved glitter, and—" He gestured at the dining table, which was indeed covered in enough glitter to supply a small craft store. "I made you 3 cards," Daisy announced, presenting them with a flourish, "because one wasn't enough for how much I like you." The cards were masterpieces of 3-year-old artistry. The first showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a yellow circle. The sun, Nora assumed. The second was mostly purple scribbles with NRA written in wobbly letters. The third, and this one made Nora's breath catch, showed 3 figures: a tall one, a small one, and a medium one with brown, scribbly hair that matched Nora's. "That's our family," Daisy explained, pointing. "That's me, that's Daddy, and that's you." Mason's face went pale. "Daisy, honey, we talked about this. Nora is our friend. She's not—" "She could be," Daisy said stubbornly, "if she wanted." Nora knelt down until she was eye level with the little girl. "These are beautiful," she said carefully, not looking at Mason because she could feel his mortification radiating like heat. "Can I keep them? Forever and ever?" "Forever and ever." Daisy beamed and threw her arms around Nora's neck again, and over the child's shoulder, Nora finally met Mason's eyes. He mouthed, "I'm sorry," for probably the 15th time since they'd met, but Nora just shook her head slightly. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. Breakfast was exactly as chaotic as promised. Daisy had indeed helped make the pancakes, which meant they came in various abstract shapes. One looked vaguely like a dinosaur, another like a blob with aspirations. Mason had also made bacon, eggs, and what he called Christmas morning cinnamon rolls that were still warm from the oven downstairs. "These are incredible," Nora said around her third bite of cinnamon roll. "Seriously, this is like eating a cloud made of sugar and butter." "That's Grandma Carter's recipe," Mason said. "She always said the secret was using way more butter than any sane person would consider necessary, and then doubling it. Your grandmother was a genius." "She really was." Something flickered across his face. Grief, maybe, or nostalgia. "She passed 3 years ago. Left me the bakery and about 10,000 recipes written on index cards in handwriting I can barely read." "But we're learning them," Daisy chimed in, her mouth full of pancake. "Sometimes they turn out wrong, and we have to feed them to the birds, but mostly they're good." "Mostly," Mason agreed. They ate at the small dining table, Daisy narrating every bite and periodically insisting on feeding Nora pieces of pancake because sharing is caring. Mason apologized less as the meal went on, settling into an easier rhythm. He told stories about learning to bake from his grandmother, about the time he'd accidentally used salt instead of sugar in a wedding cake, about the regular customer who came in every Tuesday for the same blueberry muffin and would accept no substitutes. Nora found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. There was no performance here, no trying to be impressive or interesting or enough. She could just exist. Listen. Laugh at Daisy's increasingly absurd explanations for why dinosaurs probably liked pancakes. After breakfast, while Mason cleaned up despite Nora's offers to help, Daisy gave her the official apartment tour. It took approximately 45 seconds because the apartment was tiny, but Daisy stretched it to 15 minutes by providing detailed backstories for every toy, book, and piece of furniture. "This is my room," she announced, pushing open a door to reveal a space that looked like a rainbow had exploded. The walls were painted lavender. The bedspread was covered in unicorns. Drawings covered every available surface, taped to walls, scattered on the floor, pinned to a corkboard that held at least 60 pieces of artwork. "You like to draw," Nora observed. "I like to draw very much." Daisy pulled out a box from under her bed, overflowing with crayons, markers, and what looked like finger paints. "Daddy says I'm going to be a famous artist someday and people will pay lots of money for my pictures." "I think your daddy is right. Can you draw with me?" Before Nora could answer, Mason appeared in the doorway. "Daisy, Nora doesn't have to—" "I'd love to," Nora interrupted. "If you have paper?" 20 minutes later, they were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by art supplies. Daisy drew with the intense concentration of a surgeon, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked on what she explained was a picture of Mr. Buttons fighting a dragon. Mason sat on the couch with a cup of coffee, occasionally offering commentary, but mostly just watching. Nora sketched idly, her hands moving without conscious thought. She drew what she always drew when she wasn't thinking: windows. She'd been drawing windows since she was a child, always looking in at scenes of warmth and family. A therapist had once suggested it represented her feeling of being on the outside looking in. Nora had stopped seeing that therapist. "That's pretty," Daisy said, abandoning her dragon to peer at Nora's sketch. "What is it?" "It's a window. See? You can look through it and see a family having dinner." Daisy studied it seriously. "Are they happy?" "I think so. See how they're all leaning toward each other? That means they like being together. Like us." The words hung in the air. Nora glanced up at Mason, who was staring into his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Yeah," Nora said softly. "Like us." They drew for another hour. Daisy created approximately 17 masterpieces, each one requiring detailed explanation and lavish praise. Mason eventually joined them on the floor, sketching stick figures that made Daisy laugh hysterically because Daddy can't draw at all. "I have other skills," he protested. "Like what?" "Like making sure you eat vegetables, like remembering to pay the electric bill, like—" He reached over and tickled Daisy's ribs, making her shriek with laughter. The sound filled the small apartment, bright and pure, and Nora felt something crack open in her chest. This was what she'd been missing, not romance necessarily, not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just this. The casual intimacy of being included, of mattering to someone, of being part of the warmth instead of drawing it from the outside. Her phone buzzed. Jenna again. Jenna, if you don't tell me what happened, I'm coming over there. Nora, I'm at breakfast with the guy from last night and his daughter. Jenna, excuse me? Nora, I'll explain later. Jenna, you better. I want details. I want a novel. Nora silenced her phone and looked up to find Mason watching her. Everything okay? He asked. Just my best friend demanding to know why I'm not home, wallowing in rejection. And what are you going to tell her? Nora looked around the apartment, at the crooked Christmas tree, at Daisy singing to herself while she drew, at the cinnamon roll crumbs still on the table, at Mason's worried gray eyes. The truth, that I got rejected by an idiot and rescued by a 3-year-old. I'm 3 3/4, Daisy corrected without looking up. My mistake. The day unfolded with the lazy sweetness of Christmas morning. They watched a movie, Daisy's choice, something animated involving talking animals and a villain who wasn't actually that villainous. Daisy fell asleep halfway through, curled against Nora's side like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Mason carefully extracted his daughter and carried her to her room. When he came back, he sat on the couch next to Nora, leaving a respectful distance between them that somehow felt more intimate than touching. She really likes you, he said quietly. I really like her. She doesn't usually... He paused, searching for words. Daisy's friendly with everyone, but she doesn't usually attach like this. Not this fast. Is that a problem? I don't know. Mason ran a hand through his hair, the gesture Nora was coming to recognize as his tell when he was anxious. I guess I'm worried about what happens if this, he gestured between them, doesn't work out. She's already calling you her new mommy. She's 3. She doesn't understand casual. Do you want casual? Nora asked, proud that her voice stayed steady. Mason looked at her then, really looked at her, and Nora saw everything in his expression, the fear, the hope, the bone-deep exhaustion of being a single parent who'd stopped believing in fairy tales. No, he said finally, but I don't know if I can do anything else. Not with Daisy. It's all or nothing with her in the picture. You'd be signing up for... He gestured around the apartment, at the toys and the chaos, and the life built for 2 that might have room for 3. For all of this. For a ready-made family. For a kid who draws on the walls and asks 12,000 questions before breakfast and still has nightmares about whether her mom left because she wasn't good enough. Nora's chest tightened. Is that what she thinks? Sometimes. On bad days. Mason's voice cracked slightly. I tell her the truth. That her mom left because of her own issues, not because of anything Daisy did. But she's 3. She doesn't understand adult dysfunction. She just knows she's the only kid in her preschool class without a mom. That must be hard, for both of you. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. He said it simply, without self-pity. Watching her ask Santa for a new mom because she doesn't understand that people aren't presents. Explaining why all the other kids have 2 parents at the school play and she only has 1. Making sure she knows she's enough, even when the world keeps showing her examples of families that look different from ours. Nora reached over and took his hand. His fingers were warm, calloused from baker's work, trembling slightly. Can I tell you something? She said. Anything. Last night, before Daisy found me, I was sitting at that table thinking that maybe there was something wrong with me, that maybe I was fundamentally unlovable, and James could just see it faster than most people. I went to that restaurant hoping for a chance at normal, and instead I got confirmation of every insecure thought I've ever had about myself. Mason's hand tightened around hers, and then this tiny human I'd never met looked at me like I was worth caring about. Not because of how I looked or what I could offer, but just because I was sad and she wanted to help. And her father treated me like a person instead of a disappointment. You have no idea what that meant. Nora, I'm not done. She took a breath. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. We met literally 12 hours ago. But when I woke up this morning, I wasn't thinking about James or about being rejected. I was thinking about having breakfast with you and Daisy, about whether she'd remember me, about whether this was real or just a beautiful accident." "It's real," Mason said quietly. "At least I want it to be." "So do I." They sat there on the couch, hands intertwined, while the Christmas movie played to an empty room and Daisy snored softly in her bedroom. Outside, snow began to fall again, dusting the windows of the apartment above the bakery. "I should probably tell you," Mason said after a while, "that I'm a mess. Daisy's mom, her name was Rachel, she left without warning. Just walked out one day while I was at the bakery and Daisy was with a sitter. I came home and there was a note that said she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't be a mother, couldn't be tied down, just couldn't. God, Mason. I spent a year waiting for her to come back, thinking maybe she just needed time. Maybe she'd realize what she was missing, but she never did. Changed her number, blocked me on everything. Her parents won't even tell me where she is." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So yeah, abandonment issues, trust problems, the whole package." "We all come with packages," Nora said. "Mine includes anxiety, a fear of not being enough, and a bad habit of drawing windows that symbolize my feeling of being excluded from normal life." "That's what you were drawing earlier." "Yeah. But you're not on the outside anymore," Mason pointed out. "You're here, inside, with us." The simple observation made her eyes burn. "For now. For as long as you want to be." Before Nora could respond, Daisy appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes with one fist and clutching Mr. Buttons with the other. "I had a dream about cookies," she announced, "the kind with the chocolate chips that we make on Sundays." "It's Christmas, baby. We don't have— Can we make them now?" Daisy's eyes landed on Nora, and her whole face lit up. "Can Nora help?" Mason looked at Nora apologetically. "You don't have to." "I want to," Nora said, and she meant it. So they made cookies. The bakery kitchen downstairs was a cathedral of stainless steel and the ghosts of 1,000 loaves of bread. Mason moved through it with practiced ease, gathering ingredients while Daisy climbed onto a stool and Nora washed her hands in the industrial sink. "Okay," Mason said, tying an apron around Daisy's waist. "What's the first rule of baking?" "Measure twice, pour once," Daisy recited. "And the second rule?" "If you make a mess, you clean it up." "And the third rule?" "Have fun, and don't eat all the chocolate chips before they go in the dough." Mason handed Nora an apron. It was covered in flower handprints. Small ones that must be Daisy's, larger ones that were his. She tied it on and felt absurdly like she was putting on a costume for a role she'd been auditioning for her whole life. Daisy took her role as head chef very seriously. She insisted on explaining each step to Nora, even though Nora had made chocolate chip cookies approximately 8 million times. But she listened attentively as Daisy described the importance of creaming the butter and sugar, the precise technique for cracking eggs. You have to be gentle, or the shell goes in, and that's very bad. And the critical decision of chip-to-dough ratio. "More chips is always better," Daisy declared. "That's what Daddy says." "That is not what I say," Mason protested. "I say there's a balance." "More chips," Daisy repeated firmly, dumping another handful into the bowl. They worked together, the three of them, in a rhythm that felt startlingly natural. Mason guided Nora through his grandmother's recipe, his hand occasionally covering hers to show her the right texture. Daisy narrated everything like she was hosting a cooking show. Flour ended up everywhere, on the counter, on the floor, on Nora's face where Daisy had accidentally dusted her while giggling. "You're supposed to supervise her," Nora said to Mason, wiping flour from her cheek. "I am supervising. I'm supervising you both making a mess of my kitchen." "Our kitchen," Daisy corrected. "And messes are part of art, Daddy. You said that." "I meant metaphorical messes, not literal flour explosions." But he was smiling, the kind of smile that crinkled his eyes and made him look younger. Nora caught herself staring and looked away quickly, focusing on rolling cookie dough into perfect spheres while Daisy insisted each one needed a name. "This one's Margaret. This one's Phil. This one's Sparkle Princess the Third." "What happened to Sparkle Princesses 1 and 2? Nora asked. "We ate them yesterday," Daisy said matter-of-factly. The cookies went into the oven, and while they baked, Daisy demanded they play hide-and-seek in the bakery. Mason tried to veto this idea, but Nora was already agreeing, and Daisy was already running off to hide. They found her behind a stack of flour bags, giggling so hard she gave herself away immediately. Then it was Nora's turn to hide. She squeezed into a supply closet and listened to Daisy's footsteps thundering through the bakery, Mason's voice gently guiding her. Warmer, colder, warmer again. When they found her, Daisy threw herself into Nora's arms with such force they both nearly toppled over. "You're good at hiding," Daisy declared, "but not good enough for me." They played 3 more rounds before the timer dinged. The cookies emerged from the oven, golden and perfect. The chocolate chips still melted and glossy. Daisy insisted they eat them immediately, despite Mason's warnings about burning their mouths. "Sometimes," he said, watching Nora and Daisy blow on hot cookies with identical expressions of impatient anticipation, "burned mouths are worth it." They ate warm cookies and drank cold milk at the prep counter, their legs dangling from tall stools. Daisy got chocolate on her face, her hands, and somehow in her hair. Mason laughed more than Nora had heard him laugh yet, and the sound did something dangerous to her heart. "Best Christmas ever," Daisy announced through a mouthful of cookie. "Don't talk with your mouth full, baby." Daisy swallowed dramatically. "Best Christmas ever." "It's pretty good," Nora agreed softly, meeting Mason's eyes over Daisy's head. "Yeah," he said. "It really is." Evening came too quickly. Nora knew she should leave. She'd been there all day, and there were limits to how much of herself she should impose on this family she'd just met. But every time she mentioned going, Daisy found another reason she should stay. Dinner, a game, one more story. Finally, as the sky darkened and the snow picked up again, Mason walked her to the door. "Thank you for today," he said quietly, while Daisy was distracted by putting Mr. Buttons to bed. I can't remember the last time Christmas felt like this." "Like what?" "Full." He said it simply, but Nora heard everything underneath. The apartment, the day, my heart, all of it. Full. Nora reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek. He leaned into it, his eyes closing briefly. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not just once, I mean regularly, like we're doing this, for real. I'd like that. Even with all the complications? Even knowing what you'd be walking into?" "Especially knowing," Nora said. "I don't want easy, Mason. I want real." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. It was nothing like the passionate kisses in movies, but it was perfect. A promise more than a declaration, a beginning instead of a peak. When they pulled apart, Daisy was standing 3 feet away, grinning. "I knew it," she crowed. "I knew you were going to be my new mommy." "Daisy, we talked about this," Mason started, but Nora was laughing, and suddenly he was laughing too, and Daisy was hugging both their legs while snow fell past the window of the bakery. Nora walked home through the snowy streets of Boston, thinking about windows and families and the strange way life could pivot on a single moment. 24 hours ago, she'd been sitting in a restaurant watching her hope shatter. Now she was walking home with the taste of Mason's kiss on her lips and the echo of Daisy's laughter in her ears. Her phone buzzed. "Mason. She's asking when you're coming back." "Nora, what did you tell her?" "Mason. That I'd ask you. So, when are you coming back?" "Nora. Tomorrow too soon?" "Mason. Tomorrow's perfect." That night, Nora added a figure to one of her window drawings. A woman with brown scribbly hair, standing on the inside looking out. Not excluded anymore. Not on the outside looking in. Finally, beautifully, irrevocably inside. Tomorrow became the day after, which became the week after, which became a month of tomorrows strung together like lights on Daisy's crooked Christmas tree. Nora found herself spending more time at the apartment above the bakery than in her own place on Beacon Hill. Her toothbrush appeared in Mason's bathroom without discussion. Her favorite coffee mug claimed a spot in his cabinet. Daisy's artwork began arriving in her mailbox, carefully sealed envelopes containing drawings of the 3 of them, always together, always smiling. "She mails you pictures?" Jenna asked over lunch in mid-January, eyebrows raised so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "A 3-year-old mails you art?" Mason helps her with the stamps, Nora explained, stirring her soup without eating it. But Daisy insists on drawing them herself. Last week I got one of us as mermaids. That's adorable and slightly concerning in equal measure. Why concerning? Jenna set down her fork with the deliberate precision of someone preparing to say something difficult. Because you've known them for 3 weeks, Nora. 3 weeks. And you're talking about this like you're already a family. We're not. It's not like that. We're just, you have a toothbrush there. So? So you've dated guys for 3 months who never got toothbrush privileges. Jenna leaned forward. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's fast. Like, concerningly fast. And I'm worried you're setting yourself up to get hurt. Nora wanted to argue, but the truth was Jenna wasn't wrong. It was fast. Impossibly fast. The kind of fast that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. Instead, it felt like finally moving at the right speed after years of going too slow. I know it's fast, she said quietly, but it feels right. He feels right. She feels right. And what happens when it stops feeling right? What happens when reality sets in and you realize you've fallen in love with the idea of them instead of the actual complicated truth of them? The question sat between them like a third guest at the table. Nora didn't have an answer because she'd been carefully not asking herself the same thing. That evening, she showed up at the bakery at her usual time, 6:30, after Mason closed the shop but before Daisy's bedtime. She had her key now, another milestone they'd crossed without ceremony. Mason had simply pressed it into her palm one morning and said, "In case you want to come over when I'm elbow deep in dough." The apartment was quieter than usual. No Daisy shrieking her greeting from wherever she'd been playing. No smell of dinner cooking, just Mason sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands and papers spread out in front of him. "Hey," Nora said softly, closing the door. "Where's Daisy?" "My mom took her for the night." His voice sounded hollow. "I needed to deal with some things." "What kind of things?" Mason gestured at the papers. Even from across the room, Nora could see official letterhead, legal language, the kind of documents that never brought good news. She crossed to the table and sat down beside him. "Talk to me." "Rachel's parents." He said the name like it tasted bad. "They want to see Daisy. They've been calling, sending letters. They say they didn't know Rachel had a daughter until recently. They want to be part of her life." Nora's stomach dropped. "What do you mean they didn't know?" "Rachel didn't tell them she was pregnant. Didn't tell them when Daisy was born. Cut them off completely when she left. They had no idea they had a granddaughter until Rachel's sister saw a photo of Daisy I posted on Facebook last month." Mason laughed bitterly. "I wasn't even trying to track Rachel down. I just posted a picture of my kid at Christmas, and now suddenly I'm getting letters from lawyers." "They're threatening legal action?" "Not yet, but their lawyer made it very clear they're prepared to pursue grandparents' rights if I don't cooperate." He pushed one of the letters toward her. "They want to meet her, have regular visitation, be a part of her life." Nora scanned the letter, her heart sinking with each line. The language was polite but firm. The Mitchells, Rachel's parents, expressed their heartbreak at missing 3 years of their granddaughter's life. They acknowledged that the situation was complicated but believed Daisy deserved to know her maternal family. They proposed a meeting to discuss arrangements. "What are you going to do?" Nora asked. "I don't know." Mason stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. They raised the woman who abandoned us. Where were they when Rachel walked out? Where were they when I was working 16-hour days trying to keep the bakery running while taking care of a 1-year-old who kept crying for her mama? And the other part of you?" "The other part knows that Daisy asks about her mom's family sometimes, asks if she has grandparents on Rachel's side, asks why she's never met them." He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. "What if they're good people? What if they could give her something I can't? What if I'm being selfish keeping them away?" Nora went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. He leaned back into her, his body rigid with tension. "You're the least selfish person I know," she said. "Everything you do is for her." "Is it? Or am I protecting myself? Maybe I don't want them in her life because I'm afraid they'll try to take her from me, or that they'll tell her things about Rachel that I've been trying to shield her from." "What kind of things?" Mason turned in her arms to face her. Rachel's sister mentioned in one of her emails that Rachel has struggled with mental health issues her whole life. Depression. Maybe bipolar disorder. They think that's why she left. They want to explain that to Daisy someday when she's old enough. Help her understand it wasn't her fault. That's good, isn't it? That's what you've been trying to tell her. But what if meeting them makes her want to find Rachel? What if they have contact information they'll share with her when I'm not around to manage it? What if Rachel comes back into the picture and... His voice cracked. What if she wants her back and I lose her? Mason, that's not... It could happen. He pulled away, resuming his pacing. Courts favor mothers, even mothers who abandon their kids. If Rachel showed up tomorrow with a good lawyer and a sob story about postpartum depression and mental health struggles, she could get partial custody. Maybe full custody. I could lose everything. The fear in his voice was visceral, and Nora felt her own anxiety spike in response. This was the reality Jenna had been warning about. The complications. The mess. The fact that loving Mason meant loving Daisy meant inheriting all the unresolved trauma of Rachel's abandonment. You won't lose her, Nora said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. You're her father. You've been there every single day. You don't know that. You can't promise that. No, but I can be here. I can help you figure this out. Mason stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her, and Nora saw something shift in his expression. Something that looked like hope warring with fear. Why? He asked. Why would you sign up for this disaster? Because it's not a disaster. It's a family. Families are complicated. We're not your family, Nora. Not really. Not legally. You could walk away tomorrow, and I don't want to walk away. You say that now, but this is just the beginning. Wait until Rachel's parents show up, demanding time with Daisy. Wait until there are custody battles and family court and therapists asking Daisy who she wants to live with. Wait until... Stop! Nora crossed the room and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Stop catastrophizing. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe her parents are good people who just want to know their granddaughter. Maybe they can be a positive addition to her life. Or maybe they'll destroy everything I've built. Then we'll deal with it together. Why do you keep saying we? The question came out almost angry. This isn't your problem. Daisy isn't your daughter. You don't owe us anything. The words hit like a slap. Nora dropped her hands and stepped back. Is that what you think? She asked quietly. That I'm here out of obligation? I think you're a good person who got swept up in a fairy tale. Little girl needs a mom. Lonely woman wants to be needed. Everyone gets their happy ending. Mason's voice was getting louder. Years of fear and frustration bubbling to the surface. But this isn't a fairy tale, Nora. This is real life. Messy, complicated, potentially legally devastating real life. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're playing house, coming over for dinner, drawing with Daisy, sleeping in my bed. But when things get hard, and they will get hard, what's keeping you here? What's stopping you from deciding this is too much and walking away just like Rachel did? The comparison stole Nora's breath. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Mason shouted. Then, quieter, broken. None of this is fair to any of us. They stood there in the quiet apartment, the space between them suddenly feeling like miles instead of feet. Outside, snow began to fall again, the same snow that had been falling the night they met. But this time it felt different, colder, less like magic and more like a warning. I should go, Nora said finally. Nora, you're scared. I get it. You're facing something terrifying and you're lashing out. I understand that. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. But I'm not Rachel, and I need you to figure out whether you can trust me or not, because I can't keep proving myself to you every time something goes wrong. I do trust you. Then act like it. She paused at the door. I love you, Mason, and I love Daisy. Not the idea of you, not some fantasy version, the real, complicated, messy version, but I can't force you to believe that. She left before he could respond, her vision blurring as she hurried down the stairs and out into the snow. Her phone buzzed before she'd made it halfway down the block. Mason. I'm sorry. She didn't reply. Mason. Please don't give up on us. She kept walking. Mason. I'm terrified of losing her. I'm terrified of losing you. I'm just terrified. Nora stopped under a streetlight, snow catching in her hair, and typed with shaking fingers. Nora: I know. I'm terrified too, but we can't let fear make our decisions. Mason: What do we do? Nora: We meet with her parents. We figure out what's best for Daisy. We trust each other. Mason: Can you come back, please? Nora: Not tonight. You need to sit with this. Figure out what you really want. Mason: I want you. Nora: Then prove it. Not to me. To yourself. She silenced her phone and walked home through the snow, crying for the second time on Boston's winter streets. But this time, the tears felt different. Not like rejection, like growing pains. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence from Mason, of Nora forcing herself not to text first, of sleeping badly in her own apartment that suddenly felt too quiet. She threw herself into work, finishing illustrations for a children's book about a mouse who was afraid of everything. The irony wasn't lost on her. Jenna called twice. Nora let both calls go to voicemail. On the fourth day, Daisy showed up at her door. Actually, Daisy and Mason's mother showed up at her door. Nora had met Vivian Carter exactly once, briefly, when she'd come to pick up Daisy for a play date. Vivian was elegant in the way of women who'd aged gracefully into their 60s, with silver hair cut in a sleek bob and Mason's same gray eyes. Ms. Hale, Vivian said when Nora opened the door, I apologize for the intrusion, but my granddaughter was very insistent that we visit. Nora! Daisy launched herself at Nora's legs. Grandma said you were sad, and I said we need to fix your droopy face. Did she? Nora looked helplessly at Vivian. May we come in? Vivian asked. I promise we won't take much of your time. Nora's apartment was small, made smaller by the presence of Mason's elegant mother and his whirlwind daughter. Daisy immediately began exploring, touching everything, asking questions about every piece of artwork on the walls. Is this your house? Why is it so quiet? Where are all the toys? Can I live here? Do you have cookies? Daisy, Vivian said gently, remember what we discussed about giving Ms. Hale space to breathe? Daisy deflated slightly but climbed onto Nora's couch and patted the seat beside her. Sit with me. We need to have a very important talk. Nora sat, trying not to smile. Vivian remained standing, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. My son is an idiot, Vivian announced. Grandma! Daisy looked scandalized. Idiot is a bad word. Sometimes the bad word is the right word. Vivian's eyes softened as she looked at Nora. He told me about your argument, about his fears regarding Rachel's parents, about the things he said to you. He shouldn't have shared that with... He didn't. I extracted it from him. I'm his mother. It's what we do. Vivian sat down in the chair across from the couch. And then I told him exactly what I'm about to tell you. My son has been terrified since the day Rachel left. Terrified of failing as a father. Terrified of Daisy getting hurt. Terrified of anyone getting close enough to leave him again. I wasn't going to leave. I know, and deep down he knows too, but fear doesn't listen to logic. Vivian leaned forward. I liked my daughter-in-law. Rachel was charming and beautiful, and I truly believed she loved my son. But she was also deeply troubled in ways none of us fully understood. When she left, it broke something in Mason, made him believe that love was something that could be revoked without warning. Daisy had gone quiet, playing with Mr. Buttons, but clearly listening. I'm not Rachel, Nora said. No, you're nothing like her. Vivian smiled, and it transformed her whole face. Rachel never looked at Daisy the way you do, like she's precious, like she's yours. Rachel loved Daisy, I believe that, but she loved her own freedom more. You don't have that conflict. You look at my granddaughter like she's the sun. She kind of is, Nora admitted, looking at Daisy. I know it's fast, Vivian continued. I know you've only known them a month. I know every rational person would tell you to slow down. But I've watched you with them. I've seen the way my son looks at you, the way he smiles when you text, the way Daisy talks about you like you've always been part of her life. She paused. Love doesn't follow a timeline. Sometimes it's fast because it's right. What if it falls apart? Nora heard the fear in her own voice. What if Mason's right and I can't handle the complications? Then it falls apart, and you survive, and you move on. Vivian said it matter-of-factly, without judgment. But what if it doesn't fall apart? What if you're exactly what they need and they're exactly what you need? Are you willing to give that up because you're afraid? Before Nora could answer, Daisy crawled into her lap. Don't be afraid, she said seriously, her small hands on Nora's cheeks. When I'm afraid of the dark, Daddy sings to me. When I'm afraid of dogs, he holds my hand. When you're afraid, we can hold you. Nora's eyes burned. Yeah? Yeah, because that's what families do. They hold each other when things are scary. Who told you that? You did. When you were drawing with me and I was scared, my picture wasn't good enough. Daisy pressed her forehead against Nora's. You said families help each other be brave. Nora looked at Vivian over Daisy's curls. Did Mason send you? He doesn't know we're here. He thinks Daisy is at my house having lunch. Vivian stood, smoothing her elegant slacks. But he's been miserable for 3 days. Hasn't been sleeping. Burned 2 batches of bread this morning because he was distracted. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. By bringing his daughter to guilt me into forgiving him? By bringing his daughter to remind you why you started this in the first place. Vivian moved toward the door, then paused. There's a fundraiser tonight. At the Fairmont. It's for the Children's Hospital where Daisy was born. Mason bought a table. He does every year. It's his way of giving back. He'll be there at 7. I wasn't invited. You're inviting yourself. Wear something nice. Vivian smiled. And Ms. Hale? My son is terrified of losing you. Show him he doesn't have to be. They left in a whirl of Daisy's chatter and Vivian's quiet confidence, and Nora stood in her suddenly silent apartment, wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. She texted Jenna. Nora, I need a dress. Something that says, I'm not going anywhere, but I'm also not a pushover. Jenna, finally. I'll be there in 20 minutes. And you're telling me everything. The Fairmont's ballroom glittered like something from a dream. Crystal chandeliers, white-clothed tables, women in evening gowns and men in tuxedos. Nora felt underdressed in the simple black dress Jenna had convinced her to buy, until she saw Mason across the room and forgot to feel anything except nervous. He stood near a silent auction table, wearing a suit that fit him perfectly and looking like he hadn't slept in days. His mother was beside him, whispering something in his ear. He shook his head, his expression miserable. Then Vivian pointed directly at Nora. Mason's head snapped up. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Nora saw everything in his face. Surprise, hope, fear, longing. He moved toward her immediately, weaving through tables and guests, never breaking eye contact. You came, he said when he reached her. Your mother is very persuasive. She brought Daisy to your apartment, didn't she? She said she was taking her to lunch. She did take her to lunch. My lunch. Nora straightened her shoulders. We need to talk. I know. I've been trying to figure out what to say, how to apologize for, not here. She glanced around at the fundraiser guests who were definitely watching them. Is there somewhere private? Mason led her out of the ballroom, down a hallway, and into a small private library that the hotel apparently kept for guests. The noise of the party faded behind the heavy door. Books lined the walls. A fire crackled in the fireplace. It was absurdly romantic, and Nora tried not to let that affect her. I'm sorry, Mason said immediately. I'm so sorry. You were right. I was scared, and I lashed out, and I compared you to Rachel, and that was hurtful. Unforgivable. Not unforgivable, but hurtful. Nora sat on the leather couch facing the fire. You're not the only one who's scared, Mason. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of carrying this much this fast. I'm terrified of Daisy getting attached to me and then something going wrong. I'm terrified of not being enough for either of you. You're more than enough. Then trust me. Trust that I'm choosing this. Choosing you, both of you, complications and all. Mason knelt in front of her, taking her hands. I met with Rachel's parents yesterday. Nora's breath caught. You did? I called them the morning after you left, told them I'd meet them for coffee. No lawyers, just a conversation. He squeezed her hands. They're good people, Nora. They're heartbroken that they missed so much of Daisy's life. They don't want to take her from me. They just want to know her. How do you feel about that? Scared, but also Relieved? They told me things about Rachel that helped me understand, about her struggles with mental illness, about how she'd always run when things got hard, even as a kid. They think she left because she was spiraling and didn't want Daisy to see her that way. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, but it helps explain it. And they want to help Daisy understand someday that it wasn't about her, that it was never about her. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. That's good. That's really good. They asked about you, Mason said quietly. What? I told them about you, about how you came into our lives, about how Daisy adores you, about how I'm falling in love with you. He said it simply, without drama, like he was stating a fact as obvious as the sky being blue. And Rachel's mother said it sounded like Daisy was getting the mother she deserved, the one who chose to stay. Nora couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. I'm sorry I made you doubt that you belonged with us, Mason continued. I'm sorry I let my fear make you feel like you were temporary. You're not temporary, Nora. You're the person I want beside me when things get hard. You're the person I want to share good news with. You're the person I want Daisy to call mom someday, if that's what she wants and what you want. Mason, you don't have to answer now. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I need you to know that I'm all in, completely, terrifyingly all in. He stood, pulling her up with him. So if you'll have us, both of us, with all our complications and our trauma and our occasional tendency to self-sabotage, we're yours. Nora kissed him then, hard and deep, pouring every ounce of fear and hope and love into it. When they broke apart, they were both crying. I'm all in too, she whispered. Completely, terrifyingly all in. They returned to the fundraiser hand in hand. Vivian saw them and smiled knowingly. The evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk, and Mason's hand never leaving the small of Nora's back. When the silent auction ended, Nora discovered Mason had bid on and won a children's book illustration package. For Daisy, he explained. She wants you to illustrate a story she wrote about Mr. Buttons saving the world. She wrote a story? Dictated it. It's 12 pages long and involves space pirates. Mason grinned. I told her we'd ask you, that you might be too busy with your real work. I'm never too busy for her. I know, that's why I bid. Later, as they stood on the hotel's balcony watching snow fall over Boston, Nora thought about Jenna's warning, about things moving too fast, about the risk of getting hurt. But risk was part of living, and she'd spent too many years being careful, being safe, being on the outside looking in. What are you thinking? Mason asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That I'm glad James Thompson rejected me. Mason laughed against her hair. Really? Really? Because if he hadn't, I never would have met you, or Daisy. I never would have found this. This? Home. She turned in his arms to face him. You feel like home. So do you, he said. So do you. They kissed under the falling snow, and Nora felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of fear. Fear would probably always be there, lurking at the edges. But something stronger than fear. Certainty. This was right. They were right. And whatever complications came next, they'd face them together, the way families do. The weeks that followed the fundraiser settled into a rhythm that felt almost too perfect to trust. Nora's illustration work allowed her to work from anywhere, so she found herself spending more mornings at the bakery, sketching while Mason shaped dough and Daisy narrated elaborate stories to Mr. Buttons. The Mitchells, Rachel's parents, had started video calls with Daisy every Sunday afternoon, gentle conversations where they asked about her week and told her stories about her mother as a little girl. Daisy seemed to glow with the attention, this confirmation that she had family beyond just her father and grandmother. Everything was working. Everything was beautiful. Which was exactly when Nora should have known something would shatter. It happened on a Thursday in late February. Nora was reading to Daisy before bedtime, curled up in the little girl's bed while Mason cleaned up the dinner dishes. They were halfway through a book about a brave mouse, the same one Nora had been illustrating during their fight, when Daisy interrupted. Nora? Can I call you Mommy? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through everything. Nora's breath caught. From the kitchen, she heard the distinct sound of Mason dropping a plate. Sweetie, Nora chose her words carefully. That's a really big thing to think about. I already thought about it. I thought about it lots and lots. Daisy twisted Mr. Button's remaining ear between her fingers. The other kids at preschool ask why I don't have a mommy, and I tell them I do, kind of, but she doesn't live here. And they get confused. But if you're my mommy, it's easier. Easier how? Because then you live here and you read me stories and you make pancakes with too many chocolate chips and you're here when I wake up and you're here when I go to sleep, and that's what mommies do. Daisy said it with the simple logic of a 3-year-old for whom the world still made sense in categories and definitions. Mason appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, his expression impossible to read. Baby, he said gently, that's a big question. Maybe Nora needs time to think about it. But she loves us, Daisy said, confused. She said so, and we love her, so that makes her our family, and mommies are family. It's more complicated than that, Nora started, but even as she said it, she wondered if it really was. In Daisy's world, love was simple. You loved someone. They became family. They stayed. There was no room in that equation for doubt or fear or the knowledge that people could leave even when they promised to stay. I don't want it to be complicated, Daisy said, and her voice wavered in a way that made Nora's chest hurt. I just want a mommy. Is that bad? Grandma Vivian says wanting things isn't bad. It's not bad at all, sweetheart. Nora pulled Daisy close. Can you give me a little time to think about it? It's a really important thing, and I want to make sure I do it right. Daisy nodded against her shoulder, but Nora could feel the tension in her small body, the disappointment. After Daisy finally fell asleep, fitfully, restlessly, Nora found Mason standing at the kitchen window, staring out at the dark street. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. I should have prepared you for that question. I knew it was coming. She's been asking me about it for weeks. What did you tell her? That it was up to you. That being a mommy was a choice, and she couldn't force you to choose it just because she wanted it. He turned to face her. But God, Nora, the way her face fell every time I said that, like I was telling her she wasn't worth choosing. That's not what you were saying. I know, but she's 3. She doesn't understand nuance. He crossed to the table and sat heavily. Her preschool is having a Mother's Day event in a few weeks. All the kids are making cards, and there's going to be a breakfast where the moms come in. Last year, Daisy made a card for my mother, but this year she asked if you could come instead. Oh. The word came out smaller than Nora intended. I told her I'd ask you. But Nora, if you're not ready for that, if this is too much too fast, please tell me now. Because if you come to that breakfast, if you let her introduce you as her mom, there's no going back. She'll build everything around that identity. And if you change your mind later, I won't change my mind. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Nora sat across from him. I love her, Mason. I love you. I want to be her mother. I want to be part of this family officially. Relief flooded his face, but it was chased quickly by something else. Worry. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I should have told you weeks ago. Nora's stomach dropped. What? The fundraiser? The one at the Fairmont? Mason wouldn't meet her eyes. It wasn't just for the children's hospital. It was also honoring people who've made significant contributions to the hospital. One of the people being honored was Rachel's father, Thomas Mitchell. The name hung in the air between them. He was there? Nora asked. At the fundraiser? You knew he'd be there? I knew. That's why I go every year. It's the one place I can see him without it being weird, where I can remind myself that Daisy has family out there who might actually care about her, even if they've been absent. Did you talk to him? Briefly, before you arrived. Mason finally looked at her. I introduced myself, told him who I was, who Daisy was. He already knew from my phone call earlier that week, but seeing his face when I said her name, Nora, he had tears in his eyes. And you didn't think to mention this? I wanted to tell you. I started to tell you a dozen times, but we were in such a good place, and I was terrified that mentioning Rachel's family again would make you run. He reached for her hand. I'm sorry. I should have trusted you. Nora pulled her hand back, anger flaring hot in her chest. You're right. You should have. We just went through this, Mason. We just had this fight about trust and honesty and not keeping things from each other. I know. Do you? Because it seems like every time things get complicated, your first instinct is to shut me out. She stood, pacing to the window where he'd been standing minutes before. What else haven't you told me? What other surprises are waiting? Nothing, I swear. How am I supposed to believe that? The question hung heavy between them. In Daisy's room, they could hear her stirring, murmuring in her sleep. The sound was a reminder of what was at stake. Not just a relationship between two adults, but a child's heart, a child's trust. The Mitchells want to meet her in person, Mason said quietly. They've asked if they can come to Boston. Take her to the aquarium, maybe. Spend a day with her. When? Next weekend. They'd like you to come too, if you're comfortable with it. Mason stood, moving toward her slowly, like she was something that might spook. Thomas said he'd like to meet the woman his granddaughter talks about on their video calls, the one Daisy calls my Nora. My Nora. The possessive made her chest ache. She introduces you that way to everyone now. This is my Nora. She draws and makes pancakes and fixes my droopy face. Mason's voice cracked. You're already her mother in every way that matters. I'm just asking if you're ready to make it official. Not just for her, for me too. Nora turned to face him. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you to move in. I want you here every morning and every night. I want your stuff in my bathroom and your art on the walls and your coffee mug in the cabinet. He closed the distance between them. I want to make this real, legal, permanent. I want to give you every reason to trust that I'm not going anywhere and every proof that I believe you're not going anywhere either. Mason, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. But I'm asking you to build a life with us. Officially. Completely. He cupped her face in his hands. Please don't let my fear and my mistakes chase you away from the family you deserve. I'm not going anywhere, Nora said, and she meant it. Despite the anger, despite the fear, despite every rational voice in her head screaming that this was too fast and too complicated. But you have to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets, no more protecting me from difficult information. If we're doing this, if I'm going to be Daisy's mother and your partner, then I need to know everything. The good, the bad, and the terrifying. I promise. Say it like you mean it. Mason pressed his forehead to hers. I promise. No more secrets. No more shutting you out. You're in this with us. Which means you get all of it. The whole messy truth. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other while the city hummed outside and Daisy dreamed in the next room. And Nora thought about the question the little girl had asked. Could she call her mommy? The answer was yes. Had always been yes, even when Nora was too scared to admit it to herself. The following Saturday, Nora met Rachel's parents at the New England Aquarium. Thomas and Patricia Mitchell were exactly what Nora had expected, and nothing like she'd imagined. Thomas was tall and dignified with silver hair and Rachel's same blue eyes. Patricia was petite, with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They both looked nervous, standing at the aquarium entrance with the kind of rigid posture that came from trying very hard to make a good impression. Daisy spotted them first and went suddenly shy, pressing against Mason's leg. That's your grandma and grandpa, Mason said gently. Remember? You talked to them on the computer? They're bigger in real life, Daisy whispered. Patricia knelt down, not coming closer, but making herself smaller. Hi, Daisy. We're so happy to meet you in person. You look like my maybe mommy, Daisy announced. The one in the pictures, but older. The maybe mommy reference made everyone flinch. Thomas cleared his throat. Your mother looked like my wife when she was young, he said. You have her eyes, and her smile, and probably her stubbornness, though we haven't seen that yet. I'm very stubborn, Daisy said proudly. Right, Daddy? The most stubborn, Mason agreed. The ice broken, they moved into the aquarium. Nora hung back slightly, letting the Mitchells have their moment with Daisy. She watched Patricia point out different fish, watched Thomas lift Daisy up to see into the jellyfish tank, watched their faces as they drank in every detail of this grandchild they'd missed 3 years of knowing. They're good with her, Nora murmured to Mason. I know, which somehow makes it harder. Why? Because it's one more thing Rachel took from everyone. Daisy could have known them her whole life. They could have helped when things were hard. But Rachel's issues robbed all of us of that. Mason's jaw tightened. I don't know if I can forgive her for that. You don't have to forgive her. You just have to let Daisy love them. They watched Daisy press her hands against the glass of the penguin exhibit, laughing as a penguin swam directly toward her. Patricia stood beside her, pointing and explaining, grandmother and granddaughter in profile, like a portrait of what could have been. After an hour, they stopped for lunch in the aquarium cafe. Daisy climbed into Nora's lap despite there being an empty chair, a declaration of loyalty that didn't go unnoticed. So Nora, Patricia said carefully, stirring her coffee, Daisy tells us you're an artist? Illustrator, children's books. That must be wonderful work. Creative, fulfilling. The small talk felt excruciating, everyone dancing around what they really wanted to discuss. Finally, Thomas set down his sandwich and looked directly at Nora. Daisy says you might become her mommy. Is that true? The bluntness stole Nora's breath. Mason stiffened beside her. Thomas, Patricia said quietly, we discussed this. I know what we discussed, but I think we all need to be honest about what's happening here. Thomas didn't look away from Nora. Our daughter abandoned this child. We don't know where she is or if she's even alive. For 3 years, Mason has been both father and mother. And now you're stepping into a role that our daughter vacated. I think we have a right to know your intentions. With respect, sir, you don't have a right to anything, Mason said, his voice hard. You haven't been here. You haven't earned the right to question. It's okay, Nora interrupted. She met Thomas's gaze directly. You want to know if I'm serious about Daisy, if I'm going to stick around, or if I'm going to do what Rachel did and disappear when things get hard. In a word, yes. I'm not Rachel. Nora felt Daisy's small body tense in her lap and lowered her voice. I didn't give birth to Daisy. I don't have a biological claim to her, but I choose her. Every single day, I choose her. And I choose Mason. That's the difference. Rachel was stuck with a responsibility she didn't want. I'm volunteering for a life I desperately do want. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Our daughter was sick. The mental illness, we tried to help her, but she wouldn't accept treatment. She was always running from something we couldn't see. I know, Nora said more gently. And I'm not trying to replace her in your lives or in Daisy's life, but I am going to be Daisy's mother, the one who shows up, the one who stays. That's all we want, Thomas said, and his voice had lost its hard edge. For someone to love her the way she deserves, to give her the stability Rachel couldn't. Daisy, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Are you done talking about my maybe mommy? Because I want to see the sharks and sharks don't wait. The adults laughed, grateful for the interruption. As they moved through the rest of the aquarium, the tension gradually eased. Patricia asked Nora about her work, genuinely interested in the process of illustrating children's books. Thomas told stories about Rachel as a child, carefully chosen ones that painted her as adventurous rather than troubled. Daisy absorbed it all, this narrative of a mother she didn't remember but was slowly learning to know. At the gift shop, Thomas bought Daisy a stuffed penguin that she immediately named Grandpa Tom Jr. Patricia's hand shook as she stroked Daisy's hair, 3 years of missed hugs compressed into a single gentle touch. When they said goodbye, Patricia hugged Nora. Thank you, she whispered, for loving her, for being what our daughter couldn't be. I'm not doing it for Rachel, Nora said. I'm doing it for Daisy, and for me. I know, that's why it means everything. The drive home was quiet. Daisy fell asleep in her car seat, clutching Grandpa Tom Jr. Mason reached over and took Nora's hand. You were amazing today. I was terrified. You didn't show it. You were confident and clear in exactly what Daisy needed. He lifted her hand to his lips. Exactly what I needed too. That night, after Daisy was asleep, Nora and Mason sat on the couch with a bottle of wine and the weight of everything that had been said. They're going to want regular visits, Mason said. Thomas mentioned maybe once a month, gradually building up to holidays. How do you feel about that? Scared, grateful, angry at Rachel for making this so complicated. He took a long sip of wine. But mostly glad. Glad that Daisy will know them. Glad that she'll have more people who love her. Even if it's messy? Especially if it's messy. Love is supposed to be messy. He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. Move in with us. Officially. I want to wake up to you every morning. I want Daisy to stop asking when you're coming back and just know you're here. I haven't even told Jenna yet. She's going to think I've lost my mind. Have you? Completely. Nora smiled. When do you want me to move in? Tomorrow? Is tomorrow too soon? Tomorrow's perfect, but tomorrow brought its own complications. Nora's landlord required 60 days' notice. Her apartment lease didn't end until May. She'd need to sublet or pay double rent for 2 months, a financial strain she hadn't anticipated. I'll help with the rent, Mason said immediately when she told him. No, that's not fair to you. We're building a life together. Fair is whatever we decide it is. They compromised. Nora would start moving her things gradually, spending every night at the apartment above the bakery, but keeping her place on Beacon Hill until the lease ended. It was imperfect and awkward and involved a lot of back and forth with boxes, but it worked. Daisy helped pack, which meant every item had to be examined and discussed in detail. Why do you have so many pencils? She asked, pulling art supplies from Nora's desk. Because I'm an artist. Artists need lots of pencils. I'm an artist too. Can I have these? Those are special drawing pencils, but I'll buy you your own set. We can share. Daisy said it with such simple certainty, such absolute faith that of course they would share everything now. That's what mommies and daughters do. The word landed like it always did, a question and an answer at once. Nora knelt down to Daisy's level. Sweetie, about that. About calling me mommy. She took a breath. If that's what you want, if it feels right to you, then yes, you can call me mommy. Daisy's whole face lit up. Really? Really. But there's something important I need you to understand. You had a mommy before me. Her name is Rachel, and even though she's not here, she's still your birth mother. I'm not trying to erase her or replace her. You're my new mommy, Daisy said firmly. The one who stays. Rachel is my old mommy who went away. I can have both, right? Right. You can have both. Okay, then you're mommy, and she's Rachel, and that's that. Daisy threw her arms around Nora's neck. I love you, mommy. The word cracked Nora's heart open. I love you too, baby. So much. When Mason came home from the bakery that evening and heard Daisy call Nora mommy for the first time, he had to excuse himself to the bathroom. Nora found him there 10 minutes later, sitting on the edge of the tub with tears streaming down his face. She called you mommy, he said. She did. This is real. You're really staying. I'm really staying. He pulled her into his arms, and they stayed there in the small bathroom, holding each other while their daughter, sang to her stuffed animals in the next room. 2 weeks later came the Mother's Day breakfast at Daisy's preschool. Nora woke that morning with butterflies in her stomach. She changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue dress that Daisy had declared very mommy-like. Mason made her breakfast, but she could barely eat. You're going to be great, he said, kissing her forehead. What if the other moms ask questions? What if they judge me for moving in so fast? What if you just enjoy the fact that our daughter wants to celebrate you? Mason tilted her face up. You've earned this. You've shown up for her every single day. You've loved her without reservation. You're her mother in every way that counts. The preschool had decorated the small classroom with handmade cards and wilting flowers in plastic vases. Other mothers arrived. Biological mothers, adoptive mothers, stepmothers, grandmothers standing in for absent parents. Nora realized she wasn't the only non-traditional mother there, and something in her chest unclenched slightly. Daisy grabbed her hand the moment she arrived and dragged her to a display board covered in children's artwork. That's mine, she announced proudly, pointing to a painting that was mostly purple swirls with some yellow blobs. It's you and me and Daddy and Mr. Buttons. We're at the park. It's beautiful. I know. Daisy's confidence was absolute. And look what I made you. She handed Nora a card decorated with stickers, glitter, and what might have been macaroni glued in the shape of a flower. Inside, in Mason's handwriting, but clearly dictated by Daisy, it read, Thank you for being my mommy. I love you more than chocolate chips, and that's a lot. Love, Daisy. Nora's vision blurred. Do you like it? Daisy asked anxiously. I love it. It's the best card I've ever received. The breakfast itself was chaos. Small children hopped up on too much sugar, mothers trying to have conversations while wiping up spills, teachers attempting to facilitate games that quickly devolved into friendly mayhem. Nora found herself sitting with three other mothers, answering the inevitable questions about how long she'd known Mason, how they'd met, how she'd adjusted to instant motherhood. She told them the truth, about the disastrous blind date, about Daisy offering her a hug, about falling in love with both of them before she'd fully realized what was happening. That's beautiful, one mother said. My daughter's father and I have been together 8 years, and he still doesn't look at me the way Mason looks at you. How does he look at me? Like you're the answer to a question he'd stopped asking. When the breakfast ended and Nora stood to leave, Daisy threw her arms around her legs. You're the best mommy in the whole world, she said loudly enough for the entire classroom to hear. I'm the luckiest mommy in the whole world, Nora corrected, kneeling to hug her properly. As she walked out of the preschool, card clutched in her hand and glitter somehow transferred to her dress. Nora realized she was crying. Not sad tears, not scared tears, just overwhelmed, grateful. This is my life now tears. She texted Mason a photo of the card. Mason. She's been working on that for a week. Wouldn't let me help with the glitter. Nora, I can tell. I'm covered in it. Mason. The glitter is her signature. You'll be finding it in random places for months. Nora. Good. I want the reminder. Mason. Reminder of what? Nora. That I'm hers, and she's mine. Mason. You're both mine, too. Don't forget that part. Nora. Never. That evening, the three of them had dinner at Vivian's house. Mason's mother had insisted on celebrating Nora's first Mother's Day properly, which apparently involved enough food to feed 12 people and a bottle of champagne that she claimed to have been saving for a special occasion. This qualifies, she said, popping the cork. My granddaughter finally has a mother who deserves her. They toasted, Daisy with apple juice in a fancy glass, and ate until they were too full to move. Afterward, while Daisy played in Vivian's garden, Vivian pulled Nora aside. I need to tell you something, she said, about Rachel. Nora's stomach dropped. Okay. She reached out to me last week through Facebook. Vivian's expression was carefully neutral. She saw the photos I posted from Christmas, of you and Daisy and Mason. She messaged me asking who you were. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're the woman who loves my son. That you're the mother Daisy deserves. That you're family now. How did she respond? She didn't. She read the message and never replied. Vivian touched Nora's arm gently. I'm telling you because I don't want there to be any more secrets in this family. You have a right to know that Rachel is watching from somewhere, that she might come back someday. The thought sent ice through Nora's veins. And if she does? Then we deal with it, together, as a family. Vivian's voice was steel wrapped in kindness. But Nora, I want you to hear this. You are Daisy's mother, not because Rachel isn't here, not because you're filling a gap. You're her mother because you chose her and she chose you, and that bond is sacred. Don't ever let anyone, including Rachel, make you doubt that. I'm scared of her coming back. I know. But you're stronger than your fear. I've watched you these past months. You're fierce when it comes to protecting Daisy. You're patient when Mason spirals into his anxiety. You're exactly what this family needed. Vivian smiled. My son was lost before you. Now he's found. Don't let ghosts steal that. Outside, Daisy's laughter rang through the garden. Nora watched her chase butterflies while Mason followed behind, making sure she didn't trip on the uneven stone path. Her family. Her choice. Her home. Thank you, Nora said to Vivian, for telling me, and for accepting me. I'm not accepting you, dear. I'm celebrating you. There's a difference. They rejoined Mason and Daisy in the garden as the sun set over Boston, painting everything gold. And Nora thought about Rachel somewhere out there, watching through social media, seeing the life she'd abandoned blooming without her. Part of Nora hoped Rachel felt regret, but a bigger part hoped Rachel felt peace, hoped she saw her daughter happy and healthy and loved, and knew she'd done the right thing by leaving. Because some people weren't built for staying, and some people, like Nora, were built for exactly this, for choosing, for loving, for staying, for being someone's mommy, even when it scared her, especially when it scared her, because that's what mothers do. They made it all the way to June before Rachel came back. Nora had almost started to believe they'd been granted a miracle, that Rachel would remain a ghost in photographs and video calls with the Mitchells, present enough to give Daisy a sense of history, but absent enough not to disrupt the life they were building. She should have known better. Ghosts always came back eventually. It was a Tuesday afternoon, unseasonably warm, the kind of early summer day that made Boston feel almost tropical. Nora had taken Daisy to the park after preschool while Mason prepped for a wedding cake order. They were on the swings, Daisy shrieking with delight every time Nora pushed her higher, when a woman's voice cut through the playground noise. "She's gotten so big!" Nora turned. The woman standing 10 feet away looked like she'd stepped out of one of the photographs Mason kept in a box under his bed, the ones he thought Nora didn't know about. Rachel was thinner than in the pictures, her blonde hair longer and less carefully styled, but she had the same blue eyes that Daisy had inherited. She wore jeans and a faded t-shirt and an expression that was equal parts terrified and determined. "Who are you?" Daisy asked, her swing slowing. Rachel's face crumpled. I'm your mom, baby." Everything inside Nora went cold. She stepped in front of Daisy's swing instinctively, her body a barrier between the child and this woman who had no right to show up unannounced after 3.5 years of silence. "You need to leave," Nora said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "I just want to talk to her, just for a minute, please." Rachel's eyes were wet. "I'm her mother." "No." The word came out harder than Nora intended. "You're the woman who gave birth to her. I'm her mother." "I know what I did. I know I left. But I'm better now. I've been in treatment. I'm on medication. I'm stable." Rachel took a step closer and Nora matched it, keeping herself between Rachel and Daisy. "Please, I just want to see her, to explain." "Mommy?" Daisy's small voice was confused, frightened. "Who is that lady?" The word mommy, directed at Nora, not Rachel, seemed to hit Rachel like a physical blow. She swayed slightly, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm calling Mason," Nora said, pulling out her phone. "And if you're not gone by the time he gets here, I'm calling the police." "I have rights." "You abandoned her." Nora's voice shook now. "You walked out when she was 1 year old and you've been gone for 3.5 years. You don't get to show up at a playground and demand anything." Mason answered on the first ring. "Hey, is everything— Rachel's here, at the park. You need to come now." She heard him swear, heard the clatter of something dropping. "I'm on my way. 5 minutes. Don't let her—" "I won't." Nora ended the call and turned to Daisy. "Baby, we're going to go wait by the bench, okay?" "But I'm swinging." "I know, but we need to go now." Nora lifted Daisy out of the swing, ignoring her protests, and carried her to a bench on the other side of the playground. Rachel followed at a distance, not approaching but not leaving either. "Is that lady really my other mommy?" Daisy whispered against Nora's shoulder. "She's the mommy who went away," Nora said carefully, using Daisy's own language. "The one we talk about sometimes." "Why is she here?" "I don't know, baby, but Daddy's coming and we're going to figure it out." Mason arrived in less than 5 minutes, slightly out of breath and still wearing his apron dusted with flour. He took in the scene immediately. Nora and Daisy on the bench, Rachel standing awkwardly by the swings, and his expression went through about 7 emotions in 2 seconds before settling on cold fury. "What are you doing here?" He didn't shout, but his voice carried across the playground. "I wanted to see her. I wanted to explain. You don't get to want things." Mason crossed to Nora and Daisy, placing himself between them and Rachel in an echo of Nora's earlier protective stance. "You gave up that right when you left." "I was sick, Mason. I was drowning. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving before I hurt her." "You did hurt her. Every single day you've been gone has hurt her." His hands were shaking. "Do you know what it's like to explain to a 2-year-old why her mommy doesn't want her? To watch her make Mother's Day cards for my mother because she doesn't have anyone else? To hear her tell her preschool teacher that maybe her mommy will come back if she's good enough? Rachel was crying openly now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I'm better now. I want to make it right. You can't make it right. There is no making this right. Mason's voice cracked. You don't get to waltz back in after 3 years and expect everything to be fine. I'm not expecting that. I just want a chance. To know her. To be part of her life. Rachel's eyes found Daisy, who was watching the whole scene with wide, confused eyes. Please, I'm her mother. No. Mason said it with absolute finality. Nora is her mother. You're a stranger. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Mason pulled out his phone. I have full legal custody. The court granted it when you disappeared. You have no rights here. If you want to see Daisy, you'll need to go through the proper channels. File with the court. Prove you're stable. Maybe in a year or two, if you can demonstrate consistency, we can talk about supervised visits. A year? I can't wait a year. You waited 3 years to show up. You can wait another one to do it properly. Mason's voice was steel. Now leave, or I will call the police and report you for harassment. Rachel looked at Nora then, really looked at her. You're sleeping in my bed, raising my daughter, living my life. I'm living my own life, Nora said quietly. The one you walked away from. Do you love him? The question caught Nora off guard. Yes. And her? More than anything. Something in Rachel's expression shifted. The anger drained away, leaving only exhaustion. Then, I guess I did the right thing after all. Leaving. She wiped her eyes. I was never going to be what she needed. I could barely take care of myself. But I wanted to see her. To know she was okay. She's more than okay, Mason said, his voice softer now. She's happy. She's loved. She has a mother who shows up every single day. Rachel nodded slowly. She looked at Daisy one more time, memorizing her face. She looks like my mom. She does. Mason paused. Your parents have been seeing her. Did they tell you that? They told me. They told me about the video calls and the aquarium visit and how happy she is. Rachel's voice broke. They told me I should stay away, that I'd already done enough damage. They were probably right. They love her, Nora said. They're good for her. And you? Are you good for her? I'm trying to be. Rachel smiled, sad and genuine. That's all any mother can do. Try. She started backing away. Tell her I'm sorry when she's old enough to understand. Tell her I loved her enough to leave before I broke her completely. Rachel. Mason started, but she was already walking away, her shoulders hunched against the weight of everything she'd lost. They watched her disappear around the corner. Daisy tugged on Nora's shirt. Is she coming back? I don't think so, baby. Good. Daisy said it with the brutal honesty of a 3-year-old. She made Daddy sad and I don't like it. That evening, after Daisy was in bed and they'd called the Mitchells to tell them what happened, Nora and Mason sat on the couch in stunned silence. The reality of Rachel's appearance was still sinking in, the way she'd looked at Daisy, the things she'd said, the finality of her walking away. Do you think she'll try again? Nora asked. I don't know, maybe. Mason pulled her against his side. But if she does, we'll handle it, together. I was so scared. I know. I could hear it in your voice on the phone. He kissed her forehead. But you were perfect. You protected her. You stood your ground. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her exactly what these 3 years have been like for you, for Daisy. But I kept thinking about what Daisy would remember from today, and I didn't want it to be me losing control. That's what makes you a good mother, the one who stays calm when everything's falling apart. Nora turned to look at him. Do you think she'll file for custody? Honestly, no. I think she came here to convince herself that leaving was the right choice. And when she saw us, saw you with Daisy, she got her answer. Mason's voice was rough. She's not well, Nora. I could see it. The way she held herself, the tremor in her hands. She's better than she was, maybe, but she's not ready to be a parent. Will she ever be? I don't know. And as much as part of me wants to hate her for what she did, Another part just feels sad for her. She's missing everything, every milestone, every moment, because she can't get out of her own way. They sat in silence for a while, processing. Finally, Nora spoke. I want to adopt her. Mason went very still. What? Daisy. I want to adopt her legally. I want my name on her birth certificate as her mother. I want it official. Nora's heart was pounding. I know it's complicated with Rachel. I know there might be legal battles, but I'm her mother, Mason. I want the law to recognize that. Are you sure? Because once we start that process, there's no going back. It'll bring up custody issues, Rachel's parental rights. It'll be messy. I'm sure. Rachel had 3.5 years to come back. She chose not to. She chose to walk away again today. Daisy deserves a mother who's committed, who's legally bound to her, who can't just leave. Mason cupped her face in his hands. You're really in this, completely. I told you I was all in. I meant it. Then let's do it. Let's make you Daisy's mother officially. He kissed her, soft and sweet. But there's one more thing I want to make official. He stood up and disappeared into the bedroom. Nora heard him rummaging in a drawer, and when he came back, he was holding a small velvet box. Her breath stopped. I bought this 2 months ago, Mason said, kneeling in front of her. I've been carrying it around in my pocket waiting for the right moment. But I realized today there is no right moment. There's just now, this moment, this life we're building. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the lamplight. Nora Hale, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Daisy's mother and the person I build my entire future around? Will you make this family official in every way possible? Nora was crying, had been crying since he pulled out the box. Yes, God, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd somehow figured out her size, and kissed her with everything he had. When they broke apart, they were both laughing and crying and holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in the world. Should we tell Daisy now? Nora asked. Are you kidding? If we tell her now, she'll be up until midnight planning the wedding. Mason grinned. We'll tell her in the morning. Let her be the first to know. But Daisy's door creaked open, and a small voice said, Tell me what? They turned to find her standing in the hallway, clutching Mr. Buttons, and looking sleepy but curious. Baby, you're supposed to be asleep, Mason said. I heard Happy crying. Are you okay? Daisy patted over to them, and Nora lifted her into her lap. We're more than okay, Nora said. Daddy just asked me to marry him. Daisy's eyes went wide. Like a princess wedding? Something like that. And you said yes? I said yes. Daisy threw her arms around Nora's neck and squeezed. So you're going to be my mommy forever, not just for now. Forever and ever, Nora promised. Can I be in the wedding? You can be the flower girl. Can Mr. Buttons be in the wedding? Mr. Buttons can definitely be in the wedding. Daisy pulled back, her face serious. The lady from the park, my other mommy. Will she be sad? The question was so pure, so full of concern for someone who'd essentially been a stranger, that Nora's heart broke a little. Maybe, she said honestly, but sometimes people are sad about things that are still the right thing to happen. Because she went away and you stayed? Exactly. Daisy nodded, accepting this with the simple wisdom of children. Okay, then I'm glad you're marrying Daddy, and I'm glad you're my forever mommy. She yawned hugely. Can I go back to bed now? I'm tired from all the happy crying. They tucked her back in, both of them kissing her forehead and smoothing her wild curls. As they left her room, they heard her whisper to Mr. Buttons, We're getting a new mommy forever. Isn't that good? The wedding planning consumed the next few months in the best possible way. Daisy insisted on being involved in every decision, which meant the color scheme ended up being rainbow sparkle, and the cake had to have at least 6 layers because more layers means more love. They decided on a small ceremony in the bakery itself, the place where their family had really begun, with close friends and family only. The Mitchells were invited and accepted immediately. Patricia cried when she got the invitation and called to ask if she could help with any of the planning. Thomas sent a generous check with a note that said simply, For the woman who loves our granddaughter. Jenna was maid of honor, a role she accepted while telling Nora she'd called this from the beginning. I knew the night you texted me from that restaurant that something had changed, she said over wine while they addressed invitations. You sounded different, lighter. I thought I sounded humiliated. That too, but underneath it you sounded like you were standing at the edge of something important. Jenna sealed another envelope. I'm glad you jumped. I'm glad I had someone push me, Nora admitted. Well, someone 3 feet tall with sticky hands and no concept of personal boundaries. The adoption paperwork moved forward simultaneously with the wedding planning. Mason's lawyer was optimistic. Rachel's abandonment was well documented. Her lack of contact spoke volumes, and the fact that she'd walked away at the park rather than fight suggested she wouldn't contest it. Still, there were procedures. Background checks, home visits, interviews with Daisy about how she felt about Nora becoming her legal mother. The social worker who conducted Daisy's interview called Nora afterward. In 15 years of doing this job, she said, I've never seen a child more certain about anything. When I asked Daisy how she felt about the adoption, she said, she's already my mommy. We're just telling the paper people so they know too. That's a direct quote. That sounds like her, Nora said, smiling through tears. Ms. Hale, I'm recommending approval. You're clearly exactly what this child needs. The final hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks before the wedding. Mason, Nora, and Daisy sat in a judge's chambers while their lawyer presented the case. Daisy wore her favorite dress, the red velvet one from Christmas, and held Nora's hand the entire time. The judge was an older woman with kind eyes who spoke directly to Daisy. Do you understand what adoption means? She asked. It means Mommy Nora gets to be my real mommy on paper, Daisy said confidently, and nobody can say she's not. And is that what you want? More than anything, except maybe a puppy. But Daddy says we have to wait on the puppy. The judge smiled. Well, I can't help with the puppy, but I can help with the adoption. She signed the papers with a flourish. Congratulations. Nora Hale is now legally Daisy Carter's mother. Nora sobbed. Mason sobbed. Daisy looked pleased with herself and asked if this meant they could get ice cream. They got ice cream. That night, Nora stared at the adoption certificate, at her name next to Daisy's, at the official stamp that made their bond legal and permanent. Mason found her like that, standing in their bedroom with tears streaming down her face. She's mine, Nora whispered. Legally mine. Forever. She was always yours, Mason said. But yeah, now the whole world knows it. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, September in Boston at its finest. The bakery had been transformed, flowers everywhere, chairs set up in rows, the smell of fresh bread mixing with roses. Daisy had appointed herself chief wedding coordinator and spent the morning bossing around everyone, including her grandmothers. Vivian helped Nora into her dress, a simple ivory gown that Daisy had declared very princessy, while Daisy danced around in her flower girl dress, scattering petals prematurely. You look beautiful, Vivian said, fastening Nora's necklace. And happy. That's what matters most. I am happy. I didn't know I could be this happy. You deserve it. You all do. Vivian's voice was thick. Thank you for loving my son, for loving my granddaughter, for choosing us. The ceremony was perfect in its imperfection. Daisy threw her flower petals with such enthusiasm that half of them hit the guests. Mason cried during his vows. Nora's voice shook when she promised to love and cherish him for the rest of their lives. The minister, a friend of Vivian's, smiled through the whole thing. But the best part came at the end when Mason and Nora were officially pronounced husband and wife. Before they could kiss, Daisy ran up between them. Wait, I have something to say. The minister laughed. Go ahead, Daisy. Daisy turned to face the small crowd of guests, her face serious. I just want everyone to know that this is the best day ever, because now I have a real mommy and a daddy, and we're a real family. And the lady who went away doesn't matter anymore because we have everything we need right here. She said it with such conviction that several guests started crying. Nora knelt down and pulled Daisy into a hug. You've always had everything you needed, she whispered. We just made it official. I know, but it's nice when the paper people agree. Daisy pulled back and grinned. Now you can kiss. That's how weddings end. So they did. Mason and Nora, with their daughter squeezed between them, sealing their family with a kiss and the laughter of everyone who loved them. The reception was held in the same space, tables pushed back for dancing. The Mitchells were there, taking hundreds of photos of Daisy and telling anyone who would listen about their granddaughter. Jenna gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Daisy's preschool teacher came and told stories about how Daisy had informed the entire class that her mommy was the best drawer in the whole world. As the evening wound down and guests started to leave, Nora found herself standing at the window of the bakery, looking out at the street where she'd walked alone last Christmas Eve. So much had changed in 9 months. Everything had changed. Mason came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About the night I met you. About sitting in that restaurant feeling like my life was over. About how wrong I was. Your life was just beginning. I know that now." She turned in his arms. "I almost didn't come that night. I almost canceled the date because I was scared." "I'm glad you didn't." "Me too." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for rescuing me." "I didn't rescue you. Daisy did." "You both did. You showed me what family was supposed to feel like, what love was supposed to look like. You chose me when I didn't think I was worth choosing." "You were always worth choosing. You just needed someone to see it." Daisy appeared between them, tugging on Nora's dress. "Mommy, Grandma Vivian says it's time for cake. Can we cut it now?" Nora looked down at this child who'd changed her entire life with a simple question in a restaurant. This girl who'd offered her a hug when she'd needed it most. This daughter who was now legally, officially, permanently hers. "Yeah, baby, let's cut the cake." They did, the three of them together, Daisy's small hands under Nora's on the knife, while Mason guided them both. The cake was chocolate with vanilla frosting and 6 layers, just like Daisy had insisted. It was too much cake for their small gathering, but that was okay. Tomorrow they'd bring the leftovers to Daisy's preschool, and the day after that to the children's hospital, and the day after that to anyone who wanted a piece of their joy. Because that's what families did. They shared, they gave, they chose each other every single day and called it love. Later that night, after all the guests had gone home, and Daisy was asleep upstairs with Mr. Buttons and Grandpa Tom Jr., Nora and Mason sat in the quiet bakery, still in their wedding clothes, sharing the last piece of cake. "So, Mrs. Carter," Mason said, offering her a bite, "how does it feel?" "Perfect," Nora said. "Absolutely perfect." And it was. Not because their life was without complications or challenges. Rachel was still out there somewhere, a question mark that might resurface. The Mitchells would need to be navigated with care and compassion. Daisy would grow up and ask hard questions about why her birth mother left. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt, times when fear threatened to overwhelm them. But they would face it together, as a family. As partners who'd chosen each other deliberately, completely, with eyes wide open to all the possible disasters and choosing love anyway. The snow that had been falling the night Nora met Mason had been a promise, a beginning, a door opening to a life she hadn't known she was allowed to want. And now, sitting in the bakery with her husband, and their daughter asleep upstairs, Nora realized something profound. She'd spent her whole life drawing windows, looking in at other people's happiness from the outside. But she wasn't outside anymore. She was inside. She was home. She was exactly where she belonged, with the man who'd fed her when she was heartbroken, with the child who'd fixed her droopy face with a hug, with the family she'd chosen and who'd chosen her right back. "What are you smiling about?" Mason asked, wiping frosting from her lip with his thumb. "Just thinking about how far we've come. From that terrible first date to this. Best terrible date in history." "Agreed." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder. "We should write Daisy's birth mother a thank you note." "For what?" "For walking away. For being brave enough to know she wasn't what Daisy needed. For leaving room in this family for me." Nora said it without bitterness, with genuine gratitude. "I know that sounds weird, but I mean it. If she'd stayed and been miserable, Daisy would have been miserable. This way, everyone got what they needed." "That's very generous of you." "I can afford to be generous. I got everything." She gestured around the bakery, up at the apartment where their daughter slept, at the ring on her finger. "I got you. I got Daisy. I got a family I didn't think was possible for me." "We got you too," Mason reminded her. "Never forget that. You saved us just as much as we saved you." They sat there until the candles burned down and the last piece of cake was gone and the bakery grew cold. When they finally went upstairs, they checked on Daisy, still sleeping soundly, her face peaceful in the moonlight, before crawling into bed themselves. "Hey, Nora," Mason said in the darkness. "Yeah?" "Merry Christmas." It was September, nowhere near Christmas, but Nora understood. He was talking about last Christmas Eve, about the night everything changed, about the gift they'd all given each other. "Merry Christmas," she whispered back. And somewhere in the city, snow began to fall even though it was still autumn. Or maybe Nora just imagined it, this echo of the night when a little girl had asked if she could be a new mom, and Nora had been brave enough to say yes. Either way, it didn't matter. She was home, she was loved, she was chosen, and that was all any of them had ever really needed. The end.